Hey Playas, how you doing? Welcome back to Playas Guy. Now I know you guys like this state of collecting videos, so I've got another one for you today as I work my way through all of the major consoles and what's happened to them throughout the COVID pandemic and how prices have changed and been affected. Today we'll be taking a look at the GameCube. Not already subscribed to Playas Guide, be sure to tap that subscribe button, and you could follow Playas Guide on Instagram, Twitter, and you could find daily retro gaming content on Twitch. If you're a retro gamer and video game collector, consider joining our Discord, and our community over there is linked below. Everything is linked below, but now let's get right into it. Let's hop on over to price charting and see what happened in 2021 and the past few years, what's been going on with GameCube and how it's been affected and where it's going in 2022. So here I got a couple games already pulled up, ready to go. Basically the rare ones that we knew were rare before, but I want to take a look at some of the other games that maybe crept up in price that we weren't expecting to see a price increase for. So right out of the gate, let's check out the overall market for GameCube. So here we see down in about 2012 there, summer 2012. That's kind of the low for GameCube collecting. Price charting says here the average price was $5.99, so $6. Now GameCube, that's pretty cheap, but you know it's not the cheapest. It never was the cheapest console to collect for, because GameCube is the generation where collectors got wise to what's going on, things like the nostalgia factor, even though I feel like I coined that phrase here on Playas Guide and I've never heard anyone else use it other than members of the community who've seen these videos. You know what I'm talking about. When I say nostalgia factor, even if you've never heard that term, you know what I'm talking about. And people were aware that, hey, these games are going to go up in price, especially as generations that are nostalgic for them, start to get, some money that they can spend on, things that they enjoyed in the past or want to relive those experiences. And that's exactly what we have seen. So the GameCube was never as cheap as a lot of those other consoles on average, in my opinion, from what I've seen from my experiences. And that's something we're going to see more and more of, where, yeah, Xbox 360 the average is pretty cheap right now, but, people are snagging up some of those harder to find games, and people are doing their research to find out what the harder to find games are. And for the GameCube, I would say we've kind of known what the rare games are for at least 6 or 7 years now, and those games have really come to the forefront, and we're going to take a look at how those prices have really been affected, especially with the inflation of video game prices in general for collectors over the past 2 years because of the COVID pandemic. We've seen some significant jumps right across the board. So what we have here, I think what we have here is the perfect storm of the COVID pandemic boost and the nostalgia factor, kind of just the boom, boom, boom effect. So GameCube still being affected by the pandemic and still being affected by the nostalgia factor. Has it reached its peak? I don't think it has yet. 2022 might be the peak, maybe even 2023. We'll have to see. It'll be a while before things cool off or see a dip. And that doesn't mean they're going to keep going down. It just means they might cool off a little bit, because we've seen that with some of the other consoles. So here we could see that over, the past few years, it had a steady increase in price, and it just continued to go up and down a little bit, but, nothing too significant until January of 2020. Well, okay, so it's more like March, February, which is when the COVID pandemic hit. So we see the nostalgia factor is building here. More and more people are jumping on the bandwagon for collecting for the GameCube. And I know I'm predicting right now that we are going to see that reflected in many of the rare game prices, because people wanted to bang off the rare titles right away, going into it with the mindset that they were completionists going for a complete GameCube collection. And this is where it went crazy, because that generation of gamers is, in their mid-20s to 30s now, early 30s. Even some in the early 20s, even some in the late 30s are going to be nostalgic for this console. So that's kind of the audience here on Playas Guide in general, but that's the audience here for the GameCube. And just look at it. It just keeps going up and up and up. And then it looks like in the summer, this is kind of weird because a lot of other consoles did not see a dip. This is where they saw a boost in the summer of 2021 for whatever reason. This was slowed down a little bit, but it didn't stop. It's still going up. It's January 2020. It looks like it's on its way to keep going up for February. So let's take a look at some of these harder to find games. Oh, and I do want to talk about some other items. Like, let's talk about Pokemon Box, which is not really a game, but is very rare nonetheless. So this one has never been cheap. We're looking at CIB today, North American GameCube collection, because I think that's what most people, or the most popular it is to collect for. And I'm in North America, so this is what I would be collecting, and I think a lot of the viewers of this channel. And this one, so yeah, around 2015, 2016, just a few years back, is when, a little bit of nostalgia factor kicked in, and people were starting to get wise to what games were rare, and different things to start collecting for the GameCube if you were going for a complete set. And yeah, so it was around $300, and then let's see. Well, we know what's going to happen here. It got a bit of a jump. It did get a bit of a jump before the pandemic, so this is the nostalgia factor for sure kicking in, and then the pandemic kicking in with the nostalgia factor, and this one went crazy. Look at this. It went all the way up to, it may have only been one copy. What's the previous one? Still over $1,000. So this one is easily over $1,000 now. One even apparently sold, probably in amazing condition, hopefully, for over $1,500. So let's look at some of the most expensive rares. So Gotcha Force. I did not think that this one was the rarest game, but maybe as more people have entered the collector's market for GameCube, there's less to go around, so now it is being viewed as possibly the rarest game. It certainly is one of the most expensive and a very rare game for the GameCube. And let's take a look here. So it's always had a premium. It's always been sought after, and it's had a nice gradual climb here. Lots of little peaks and valleys, but it's worked its way up there to about the 200 mark, just under it for the longest time. And I feel like the end of 2018 and beginning of 2019 is where we're going to see a lot of these GameCube games start to climb, because that's the nostalgia factor right there, which we're seeing here in Gotcha Force. Also, I think might have been early 2019, I did a video on what to collect for, what to look out for, some of the rare games for the GameCube. I'm not saying I'm the reason for that, but I'm sure there's other YouTubers talking about this subject, and as this knowledge is put out there for consumption, people become aware of what they should be looking for and start drawing their own conclusions, start hunting for these games. I'm not actively really looking for anything on GameCube. I have a rather small collection of GameCube games, most of the flagship titles and some games that are important to me. I'm not going for a complete GameCube collection, but if you are, let me know in the comments below and share with me some of the knowledges and experiences that you've gained over your journey of collecting. And yeah, so it just kept going up there. This is the nostalgia factor. More of a gradual climb. What we've seen with the pandemic is this here. Generally in the spring, late winter of 2020, prices just jump. They just skyrocket, which we see here. This one wasn't right away. Most of the popular titles I'm expecting we'll see in February, March, because people who are new to collecting or didn't intend to get into collecting just wanted to have a small sort of collection or relive some of the games they enjoyed in the past, entered the market, and then they catch the bug, and then now they're looking for Gotcha Force in September, August of 2020. And then, you know, we've seen a bit of this with some of the other video game collecting markets where the price slows down or drops a bit and then picks back up in the summer of 2021. The other game, before we get to Cubivore, was NCAA 2K13. This one, a lot of people looked at as the rarest title for the GameCube, I believe, back in, let's say, 2018 or so. And you can see that this was always around $100, this game, for a long time. And let's see, 2017, 2018, yeah, people started to recognize it as a very rare game, maybe the rarest on the GameCube. Is that still the view for GameCube collectors? I'm guessing not, looking at where this one falls on price charting for a CIB copy. Durability and rarity may be what has caused this game to not be quite as valuable. Perhaps it is not quite as rare. Still very rare, but not quite as rare and not as desirable because there's not as many people wanting to play NCAA 2K3 as there are Gotcha Force, understandably so. But it does appear that this game is, although not as sought after, possibly more rare. I had always thought that it was, but seeing the price this low compared to many of the other rares on the GameCube does make me question its rarity. If you know anything about this, let me know in the comments below, guys. Greatly appreciate if you share any information you have for GameCube collecting with the community. Cubivore, this is a top 10 tier rarity that has really gotten hyped up. I see a lot of YouTubers talking about this one. It's on everybody's top 10, a lot of people's top 5, and with good reason. It's definitely one of the more rare games. There's a lot more sales for this game, though, than there have been for NCAA 2K3 and Gotcha Force. This one had a premium for a while, but not at the same level as Gotcha Force and NBA 2K3. But it had a gradual climb. And let's see, here's 2017, 2018. Pretty steady price here, but this is where nostalgia factor starts to kick in. And there it is. There's the big jump from COVID. And then it just shot right up here. Wow, look at that. And, you know, that might have just been a couple sales that built it up to that. But once it got up to that price, people aren't going to let go of that game for so cheap. So even though it came back down, still, you know, almost double what it was pre-pandemic. So Metroid Prime and Zelda Wind Waker, this is one that it's a great disc because they're both great games. It's pretty hard to find. Some of these, I don't know, I don't believe they're as rare as people say they are, because it's hard to say because I've seen all of these games. When I worked at a game store, I've seen all of them come through the store. I've just, as a shopper, I've come across all of these games, swap meets, conventions, video game stores. You can find them. They're out there. This one has a lot less sales though. So, maybe I'm just kind of fortunate to come across these rare GameCube games so often. Or it could also be within the GameCube collection, they're very rare, but in comparison to some of the rares that I'm looking at on like the Super Nintendo, there's a pretty big gap in terms of the rarity. This one, just gradually climbed up, but here we have the pandemic jump. But because there's less sales, the price kind of hit that jump, and it's climbed up, but it's been more so steady, just like here at the beginning pre-pandemic, very steady. Go Hyper Grind. Here's a rare one. This one I actually don't see very often. Those other games I actually see quite often. Pretty much everything here, like we're going to talk about Fire Emblem and Chibi Robo and Skies of Arcadia, Def Jam Fight for New York. I see those games from time to time. It's they're not that hard to find. This one I really don't ever see. So this one, surprisingly, was very cheap. So this was very undervalued and underestimated. Now I know before, when I was doing research for the video I did on GameCube Collecting, which I'll link at the end, and I don't talk too much about GameCube on this channel. I do touch upon it on from time to time in videos, but this isn't a channel where I focus on GameCube collecting. This is a retro gaming and video game collecting channel. So if those are things that interest you, please subscribe to the channel. Anyways, this one was what you would call a sleeper. And then the nostalgia factor, just before nostalgia factor, really, because here what we're looking at is preemptive purchasing for the nostalgia factor by collectors in the know. And I remember at this time I was kind of looking for some of these GameCube rares, and this one was not on my radar at this time, not until about 2018, where it had a bit of a premium, but it wasn't widely recognized as like a top 10 tier rare game for the GameCube. And in my video, I believe I mentioned this one. I'm almost certain I did. And then it's taken off with the nostalgia factor here at over $100. Dipped back down a bit, but it was on its way to climbing up regardless of the pandemic. The pandemic just did what it did to a whole bunch of games, where just boom, it went from 200 to 400, and the price of a lot of rare games and popular games just shot up and doubled in price. Then what we've seen here, typical, is the dip back down, then the jump back up. So this one looks like it's on the decline again. Here's the thing about this decline, guys. The games are going to go down. So you might think, oh, the bubbles burst. This game went down like 30, 40%. But when we're looking at it, are we looking at 40% of December or January 2020, December 2019? Or are we looking at the peak here, the most recent peak? Because yes, it's dropped down, but it's still nearly double. The game would have gradually climbed up to probably around the 300 mark anyways. So it might just be kind of, the market might just be kind of correcting itself. It might see a little bit of a dip beyond that, but that's kind of to be expected, right? Because we can't continue to go up the way we have over the next few years, where everything doubles. There is this sort of mentality around collecting right now, where if you don't buy it now, it's going to double in price next year, and you won't be able to buy it. And it's that fear of losing out of this discounted or cheaper price that it's going for now that is really driving prices up. Fire Emblem, Path of Radiance. Fire Emblem games seem to always hold value and seem to always be appreciating value. I've also noticed for the GameCube some Resident Evil games that didn't really have too much steam before have really gained a lot of momentum and gotten hot. Horror games in general, from the PlayStation right up to the PlayStation 3. Those 3 generations did horror games very well, and there's a lot of people that want to play those games, so they're hot right now. Probably not going to slow down too much, because games like Resident Evil, Silent Hill, they have a cult following, and there's collectors and people who are interested in these horror games that are going to look for some of the more niche titles, and some of those are quite hard to find, especially on the PS2 and PS1. So we do see a little bit of that on the GameCube. Myself, as a gamer, I generally tend to go to the Xbox or the PS2 for games that are across all 3 platforms, because GameCube, because Nintendo always holds value better than any other console. From what I've seen, Nintendo usually has pretty good quality products that are reliable, and Nintendo's got this history, this long, rich history behind it. So people generally navigate towards Nintendo, and because of that, the Nintendo versions of games are always cheap or more expensive. So that's not the case with this, because Fire Emblem is exclusive to Nintendo. So this game has had a fan base for a long time, and it demanded a premium for a long time because of that $100. Now this one, not as much affected by nostalgia factor. We do see it here in 2018, 2019, where it did get a jump, but not as much affected, because this is a game that is more sought after by players and it's harder to find, which is why it has that premium. Not like it's not like a hidden rare or anything like that. It's like a popular uncommon, in my opinion. So yeah, always had a premium. Obviously nostalgia factor bumped it up, and then the COVID pandemic made it, well, it didn't go too nuts, did it? But it definitely jumped significantly, up to $300 at one point there. And now it seems to be leveling off. I could see this being a $200 game for a while, but time will tell. I do think that things may start to slow down for some consoles, mid to late 2020, if not early 2023. We'll see what happens. We also got to see what happens with, just the overall economy too, because if the economy's not doing great, we're not going to see people with that kind of extra cash that they can spend. There's certainly not going to be the stimulus checks that fueled the market to really jump up, and people staying home. You get some extra money and you're at home. What are you going to do? You're going to play video games. What video games? You should be playing retro video games. Anyways, here's one, kind of a sleeper here. The Disney Sports game. This one is the Disney Sports Basketball. Disney Sports games are fairly uncommon, and you're not going to come across them too often. I rarely see these ones. I feel like I'm more likely to see like the Fire Emblem game that we were just talking about than one of these Disney Sports games, but they are out there. I don't know what happened here. If you guys could tell me what happened here. This seems like a speculative hype or something here, but it certainly drew people's attention back in 2017. It got my attention to this game, these Disney Sports games. So this could really be a estimated in terms of its rarity. It could be rarer than we really know. And then it just gradually climbed. It's got the nostalgia factor here, so now it's got a premium after people saw that. And then the pandemic hit, and this is one I think would have appealed to collectors. So this is collectors snagging it up, and good on them, because it is a hard game to come by. And this one's got some real steam behind it. It's up and down. It's got these dips, but for the most part, it's on a steady incline here. It's going up. Ribbit King. This is one that just caught my attention and was not on my radar until I was going through these GameCube games. So this game was definitely a sleeper, and then it had a premium, but it kind of had a premium where it's not on everybody's radar. It's kind of like one of those sort of expensive, uncommon games which are on every console. And what I think happened generally with these games is people gravitate and they go for those expensive games. And once they start banging those out, there's always a few games out there that you just don't see. I don't see this one. This is one that I don't see. This is probably the case for a lot of collectors going for complete sets. So it's like one of those hidden rares. But now that we're, getting towards the height of GameCube collecting, and it's really come to its own in terms of being a collectible console, you're going to see those titles start to surface. People are going to start to pay more attention to them, because now those collectors that are going for the complete sets, they're looking for those last 10 or 20 games that they don't have. And this one is probably on a lot of people's lists. So the nostalgia factor didn't affect it too much. The pandemic did. But I think what really happened here is a combination of the pandemic and the nostalgia factor, and collectors looking for copies of this game. Let's just see. So it looks like there's already been 2 sold this year, quite recently actually. No, this one, look at that. There's a whole bunch that sold in October. So yeah, it could be just one that, it's one of those uncommon games that you don't see too often, and now people want it to complete their collections. Def Jam Fight for New York. I like what I'm seeing right here, because this is one that I actually see quite often. I also see it quite often on the PS2. And this is one people recognize here on the GameCube as being a very rare game, or they did. I didn't so much. I've just seen a lot of hype around it. And I mean, I've seen in some game stores they've had like 2 copies of this game at times. So in my opinion, all the other games we've talked about are more rare than this game. You might have a different opinion. Let me know why, if you do. Try to back up what you got to say in the comments with your experiences or information, knowledge, or facts that you have. That way, as a community, we could kind of come together and draw a bigger picture. But my experience, I see this one quite often in game stores and at swap meets. So, it's the games I don't see too often. Those are the ones that I really consider to be the true rares. Nonetheless, this is a game that is not easily found and does command a premium. The pandemic here, was affected by the pandemic, got a pretty good boost here, doubled in price, and then it looks like it doubled in price again, but it's dropped back down. I don't see this one being a $200 game. That's just a couple, maybe 1, 2 sales, 3 sales that were up there. This one will maybe be around 100 or just over 100. It'll find its place. And there's already been lots and lots of copies of this game sold last month and already this year. Hey, then we got Skies of Arcadia Legends here. This is a rare one. I have seen this one from time to time, but I don't see it too often. Looks like sales have been pretty good for this game. I think what the case of this game is that it may just be very uncommon, and it's a good game that people don't want to let go of. A lot of people like this game. I know that. And, you know, the gamers and the collectors both don't want to let it go. So it makes it harder to find. But looking at the prices here, there's definitely going to be some people saying, hey, I could use whatever, 150 bucks and let it go. Nostalgia factor. A lot of what we're seeing here, where I would say the nostalgia factor kicks in, is like the gradual climb. So the game commanded a premium for a while, went up a little bit, and then it, went up $10, $20, $30, and then the pandemic hit, and then it nearly doubled. And then this is just kind of what we're seeing here, where it drops off. People are probably like spending too much or whatever, and then I don't really know why there was so much hype to buy this past summer in 2021. But there was, like, look, April's the spring, but for a lot of these games, we see this double peak. We're seeing that. And I think we're also going to see on a lot of stuff a triple peak. I think we're going to see, it's going to be kind of weird. I think we're going to see another peak in the next month or two. For some of these, they're going to climb up. It may not look like a peak so much, but then when you see them start to go back down towards mid-end of the year, or they're not really dropping, they're just kind of stabilizing a little bit more. Might not, now I'm getting into the overall general market, but for GameCube, we may not see as much of that because this console is so hot. But some games will surely be affected. So here's Resident Evil Code Veronica, another game not hard to find. I've seen this one all the time. I might even have this game. Always commanded a premium because it's Resident Evil. People like Resident Evil games. It has a fan base. Nostalgia factor here. Understandably why this would be a nostalgic game for a generation of gamers. Most Resident Evil games are. They go over fairly well. It's got a bit of a boost, but then it kind of went back down, which is weird. Then obviously the pandemic hit. There's your first peak. There's your second peak. And looks like we might get a third peak. And I'm thinking, what I was talking about, the concept of buy it now or pay double later is going to be what accelerates this, as well as maybe some people getting some decent tax returns in early 2020. We'll have to see. And staying home, with a lot more people are staying home again because of the Omicron variant of the virus. But that, I think that's going to blow over soon too. I think it's going to come in quick and hard and maybe leave just as fast, but who knows, then there'll be another variant. Anyways, I don't want to get too much into that because we just have to live with it. And, we may have to just keep living with every time there's a new variant of COVID, there's a new spike in video game prices. That could happen too, but I think we'll see a big spike here, or a third peak, and then things are going to drop again. Mario Party 7. So I think we're going to see this with a lot of the first party titles, where they're just gradually going up, which is expected. But here's where, if you're a reseller, because the first party games, we know they're not rare, but they're popular, so you're always able to move them, right, as a reseller. And during the pandemic, they moved very well, and any inventory you had here in 2019, you were able to pretty much double your money on over the next year, but it probably sold instantly too. It was a quick sell. Look at that one, went all the way up. Now it's about a $65 game, which isn't too bad. That might even still go up a little bit more on a steady increase. I mean, we still get the two big peaks here that we've seen with everything, and it looks like we're working on the third. But it's a little bit more level. It's not as dramatic as some of these other games we've seen. Simpsons Hit and Run, another one that's pretty common, but a lot of people want to have it in their collection. Yeah, these were the days. I remember this one. It was a $15, $20 game for the longest time. Nostalgia factor starting to drive it up a couple bucks, I guess, maybe 30, from 20 to 30. And then we get the pandemic, the two peaks, and now it's a $50, $60 game for Simpsons Hit and Run. And I mean, if you're looking on eBay, buy it now, there's probably some $70 or $80 ones that are hopefully in really nice shape. Nicaragua, this is one that I've always thought as being a pretty rare, hard to find game. Let's look at the sales. Quite a few sales. Oh yeah, plenty of sales. So it's an uncommon game, but it's very popular game within the shoot 'em up communities. And that's why this one has always had a premium, but this has just been steady. I mean, it was affected here by the pandemic, but this, you can't even really tell. You can't even really tell with this one. This one has really just been a steady climb up to about 70, 75 bucks, which seems about right. There we go with Billy Hatcher. Not really a premium, but not a cheap game at all. 25, 30 bucks. And then it jumped up here in the pandemic. I would even say that it was higher than $25 or $30 before this. But the pandemic has doubled the price. This one doesn't look like it's really dipping down too much. Definitely going up and still increasing in value. This one surprises me that this is up here at like $60, $66 now. Because this was always like a $10, $15 game in my opinion. Here it says it was always 20, so we'll take Price Charting's word for it. Always $20 on eBay. Maybe game stores were a little bit cheaper because they want to have a quicker turnaround for their sales than some guy selling games out of his basement or his garage who can just let it sit there in a stack for 2 years or however long without it selling, right? Doesn't have the overhead. And then the pandemic jumped it up. Now I'm curious to look at a lot of Mortal Kombat games. I might do a Mortal Kombat episode and look at Mortal Kombat collecting and some of the games, because I am a Mortal Kombat fan. Have all the Mortal Kombat games, and this is surprising to me. But this, I got to cross-reference with some of the other Mortal Kombat games if they've gone up, because I don't know why this one would see such an increase. I didn't think this was that hard to find. I think I might even have 2 copies of this game, like a loose disc, and then I had to swap out the case with whatever I did. I also like the FZero games. Have all of those games, and this one had sort of a premium. It was always over $20. And sure enough, nostalgia factor, it being one of the flagship titles for the GameCube, caused it to start to climb in price. And just like everything else, the pandemic doubled it in price, and then it doubled again. Wow, almost $100. But we don't have an FZero game. We need a new FZero game. So if people are looking for a newer FZero game on a console, this would be it, right? If you're not going to play the Game Boy Advanced games. So that could be driving the price here. And also Smash Brothers. There's a generation of Smash Brothers gamers that all know Captain Falcon and Falcon Punch, and don't really know, like, never played F-Zero on the Super Nintendo, the N64, and maybe they only know the GameCube version, if that. So, I mean, that interest could be what's driving this game to go up. It's a good game, so, I mean, if people want to pay a premium, I can't blame them. Speaking of Super Smash Brothers, here it is, Super Smash Brothers Melee. I don't ever remember seeing this game below $20, even below $30 that it says. It's climbed up over time. I'd say it was for the longest time like a $40 to $50 game, which is sort of reflected here, I would say. Yeah. Yeah, sure it is. Okay. And look at that. This is so weird. Now, I've heard a lot of people say that Super Smash Bros. Melee is their favorite or the best Smash Bros. Game. But for a Smash Bros. Game, the price certainly doesn't reflect that it's the best Smash Bros. Game that you must own. Otherwise, it'd be probably around 100, 120 now, because it did not double during the pandemic. It went up a little bit, but I wouldn't be surprised if you could go out today and pick up a copy for $60, maybe even less if you got a game store that gives you a bit of a deal on their games. The Paper Mario games, though, right across the board, I've seen Paper Mario games seem to hold their value really well, if not appreciate in value, right across the board for Paper Mario. So here again, maybe somewhere it was $25. I don't remember it being $25. A lot of these first-party Nintendo games were at least $25 to $40 for the longest time. Just because that's the way it is now for collecting, and especially for first-party Nintendo titles. Like, if you look at the sales Nintendo has on their games, even the new copies, they're never really liquidating the stuff, right? Like, it doesn't happen anymore because they know their games hold value, and those are the games people buy a Nintendo console to play. It freaking skyrocketed here, though, at the start of the pandemic. That's ridiculous. It's no wonder it came back down, because look at that peak. That's huge. Okay, so then came back down and kind of sitting around $100 now, which is a bit steep if you ask me, but that seems to be the going rate, and I think it's gonna kind of level off there for the next little while. Let's finish it off here with Spells and Spirits. This game I don't know anything about, but it caught my eye because look at this. It was a cheap game. Well, there's one for $50 there, but yeah, cheap game, under $20 for a long time. Looks interesting, even just looking at the cover. If you saw this one for like $12, I would have picked it up back then. And the nostalgia factor seems to have affected this one, but I think it's also a little bit of collectors looking for, those last few games to complete their collection, and this is an uncommon one that not a lot of people know about. So it became like a $50 game here, and then the pandemic. Oh my God. Wow, and it's still just climbing up. So, if you bought a copy for $50, you're laughing now. Good on you. Anyways, that's it for this episode of Playas Guide. It was nice to take a look at what is going on with the current market of GameCube collecting. I know there's some games like Spells and Spirits and Mortal Kombat Deception. I'm going to keep an eye out for those, because you never know, you might still be able to find one for, a bargain, because I don't think a lot of people know about the price of those outside of the collecting community. If you'd like to see more State of Collecting videos, please check out the library of videos here on Playas Guide and subscribe to the channel. Until next time, I'll catch you on the flip side.